So I saw someone recently trying to defend the ridiculousness that the Fast and Furious franchise has become. And they basically said, would y'all seriously rather have 9+ movies about realistic street racing? And my only response to that would be, no, I'd just rather not have 9+ movies to begin with. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Fast X features Dominic Toretto and his family being confronted by the most lethal opponent they've ever faced. Stop me if you've heard this before. Fueled by revenge, a terrifying threat emerges from the shadows of the past to shatter Dom's world and destroy everything and everyone that he loves. The funny thing about this franchise is that up until a couple of movies ago, I was actually still pretty invested in it. I'm a huge fan of the original movie, of course, but I did love how they took the franchise in a new direction in the more modern sequels, basically turning them all into these elaborate over-the-top heist films.
I like it a lot.
I actually thought that Fast 5 and Fast 6 were pretty decent action movies at the time of their release. The interesting thing about those movies is that they still had this heartfelt core to them, and that kept the conflicts somewhat personal and allowed you to connect with these characters on some level. And then somewhere in the middle of Fast 7 and into Fast 8, the ridiculousness completely took over.
What the hell am I looking at? When does this happen in the movie?
And in my opinion, this franchise lost all of its heart. And a big reason for that is because of the absence of Paul Walker. This franchise has yet to fill that void and find a way creatively to move on without him. To me, Fast 8 and Fast 9 were nearly unwatchable because of that. Because at this point, the redeeming qualities that these movies had is now gone, and what you are left with is one movie after another trying to outdo the previous movie, and all they're really trying to do at this point is just see how ridiculous they can possibly be.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on! Let's get nuts.
Part of me was hoping that they would scale things back a little bit for Fast 10 after they went to space in Fast 9, and in the early moments of Fast 10, it felt like they might do that. Initially, it felt like this movie was going to focus heavily on Dom's relationship with his son. Being a dad myself now, that is something that would have interested me.
Why do you cry?
But unfortunately, at some point this movie reverts back to the same old shit we see all the time in Fast and the Furious movies. It's almost impressive how many times this franchise has inserted a new important character into the events of previous films as a way of making them seem even more important. It doesn't always make sense, but it is practically this franchise's calling card at this point. Dom and his team have wronged somebody in a previous movie, and that person that we didn't even know existed is coming back for revenge.
I don't get it.
That is the literal plot of at least 3 or 4 Fast and Furious movies. This time, the person who was wronged is Jason Momoa's new villain character. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what Jason Momoa or anyone involved with this movie was trying to accomplish with this character. The only way that I can describe him is an over-the-top, flamboyant, eccentric, rich kid who at times acts like a knockoff Joker.
Because it's all part of the plan.
I think they were going for the Agent of Chaos thing with him, but he's so ridiculous, he's so goofy, and he's so cringe. All of that kind of removed his mystique and made him significantly less threatening. I just can't take him seriously as a viable threat when he's walking around calling other characters buttholes. I mean, who wrote this? James Gunn?
Ha ha, very funny motherfucker.
And while we're at it, can we talk about John Cena's character for a moment? Jacob Toretto, the inexplicable lost brother of Dominic, who they randomly inserted into the last movie and into Dom's origin. He was actually pretty threatening in the previous movie, but he only exists for laughs in this film. And it's that kind of cringe Marvel humor where a big buff guy who wouldn't normally talk like that says the most quirky and cringe things possible. And based on everything that happens with Jacob in the previous movie and in this movie, I'm convinced now more than ever that his character really didn't need to exist. Brie Larson was also added to the cast this time around. On a positive note, she shows more personality in this movie than she's shown in her entire run in the MCU. But again, her character feels kind of pointless.
It wasn't made for him.
It's almost as if the writers are just making up random BS parts just so they can get another recognizable face into the movie, which is exactly what I think they're doing. The core cast returns as well, and even they feel like they've run out of things to do. A highlight of these movies is typically the banter between Roman and Tej, and even that has lost its luster and is nowhere near as entertaining as it used to be. They also tried to give Roman his own little side story, but even that kind of fell flat.
How can you not care?
Like this.
The action, of course, was completely unrealistic in every way, per usual, and I understand that's kind of the point now and they don't want you to take this too seriously, but just because you are intentionally trying to be as over the top as possible, and almost intentionally trying to be bad, that doesn't make it good. There was one action sequence I did enjoy that involved a giant bomb in the shape of a ball rolling through the streets of Rome. Think of it as the world's largest version of Marble Madness. I may have just dated myself with that reference. Anyway, a lot of these action sequences just made me roll my eyes. A lot of these scenarios would work as theme park rides, but as a movie sequence, it's almost impossible to feel anything towards them. I think my biggest issue with the franchise, and I could overlook the over-the-top action and the ridiculous characters, but the stakes, and I mean real stakes, have all but been removed from this franchise.
I have no respect for those with no respect for logic.
Death in this universe literally means nothing. And they double down on that concept in this movie ×2. It's at the point where you could see a character get incinerated inside of a car. And in the back of your mind, you're thinking to yourself, well, it's a fast movie, so he'll probably be back.
That makes sense.
This movie actually ends on a cliffhanger, which is something that's new for the series. But how are we supposed to care about that cliffhanger, or the fates of these characters, if you've already shown us that death is only temporary in the Fast and Furious universe? And don't tell me that I'm reading too much into it. I can suspend disbelief to a certain point. But there is going to be a point where I almost feel like my intelligence is being insulted, and I think we're there. And at that point, I just kind of roll my eyes and say, F off. I honestly don't know where the Fast franchise goes from here, and I suppose it doesn't really matter either. All I know is that there is still 2 more of these movies coming, and I can't fathom a situation outside of resurrecting Paul Walker himself that would make me care about these movies again. This movie is the literal definition of making me feel absolutely nothing. It is a franchise that has gone on for far too long and has truly lost its way. It actually feels like they almost aren't even trying anymore. So that's why I'm going to give Fast X the Careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care! Y'all be cool. Shut up.